Hey, if you're watching live, we apologize for that. Technology sometimes does some weird stuff. So we're back, and luckily we were right at the end of one of our conversation topic, because I wanted to move on to something that is tangential and probably one of the things that people are most wanting to know from someone who is actually there. Once again, we are with at Backup Hangman on Twitter, Hollywood Hangman Adam Pierce.
Yo,
He was there at Grand Slam. He was there for all 4 hours in Arthur Ashe, one of the 20,000. And I'm really glad you're here for a
yep.
number of reasons. But this particular one is something that from the moment that you said you were going and that we were going to get to talk to you, this is something that I've been wanting to ask you from moment one. One of the things that we've gone back and forth about in our group chats on the podcast is the Men of the Year, right? And the
Yeah.
American Top Team involvement, Dan
Oh,
Lambert,
yeah, yeah,
all
yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. Now, I have been a defender of it from the beginning. I think that
hmm
I like what they're doing. I think the biggest criticism that you can say is that the Men of the Year don't need someone to talk for them, but
Yeah.
as a vehicle for first of all getting them on TV, but also getting a lot of the American Top Team on TV and starting to
hmm
involve these mixed martial artists and stuff like that. I really like that, and I think that this is that Dan Lambert is a good promo. He's an old school style promo, and
hmm
it's the kind of thing that I want from heels, because I
Yeah.
genuinely I dislike him and I want to see him get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
And to me that's what a heel is supposed to be about. Now, we've had all kinds of debates about it, and I know
hmm
that I want you to weigh in with your opinion as well. But the first thing that I want to ask you is from someone who has now the biggest cross section of the AEW audience that there has ever been. 20,000 people. There's never been more
Yeah.
AEW fans in a single place watching an AEW
Yeah.
show. So from that perspective, do you think that American Top Team and Dan Lambert, is it go away
Mhm.
heat or is it real heat?
That's a great question. So Lambert didn't get to cut a promo in Arthur Ashe, so I couldn't get a perfect read on it there. But
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you this: being in the venue for the Prudential Center when they did the Dynamite a week prior, right?
Mm-hmm.
The heat he got there was legitimate heat. And I made this comment on Twitter because I have seen, like, he's a very polarizing guy. I've seen a lot of different opinions on Lambert and AEW.
Right.
And what I can say is this: being at the venue, people were really hyped to shit on him there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, they were ready to give him shit. The minute he came out, like, everybody, like he got the second, being there live, he got the second best heel reaction of the entire night, if not equal to MJF being there. Like,
Wow.
yeah, like, everybody legitimately rose up to be able to just passionately tell damn Lambert, fuck you. Like, that's what it felt like. Yeah, like, it was like they just plastered in their minds Jim Cornette on his body and just, like, gave middle fingers. Like, that's what it felt like almost.
Wow.
Yeah. He got a really, really huge heel reaction. So, when it comes to Lambert as a whole, like, my stance on him is, like, I have no issue with his actual shtick,
Mm-hmm.
because throughout wrestling history there's been heel characters who their gimmick is basically to say that the show stinks and that everybody on it sucks, and that they're not real tough guys. I've seen that before,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it's a bad shtick at all, actually. The key with him is to give it direction, and to, to have an end goal of some kind with it, right?
Right.
and and you have to have a proper payoff to this whole "my guys are tougher than your guys" thing. and
Mm-hmm.
and clearly Tony's way of doing that was to stick them with the Man of the Year, and I don't necessarily see the correlation at all with them and the Man of the Year. I don't think the Men of the Year need mouthpieces,
Yeah.
nor do I see the correlation with them and Lambert. I know they try to create one by saying all these guys did they had fight backgrounds too, but really, as a wrestling fan who watches the wrestling show, I don't look at Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page as boxers or MMA fighters. No matter how
Yeah.
much you tell me that they trained in it, prior. That's not the visual that I have in my head when I see them. That's not how they've been presented. So
Mm-hmm.
it feels a bit hackney to just kind of throw them with Lambert and make you believe that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a weird thing because I thought that, and in my head I was like, the real logical thing is to get more shoot style guys with Lambert,
Yeah.
you know, and what they ended up doing is bringing the actual American top team on,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, with Junior Dos Santos, and they had Paige Van Zant there, and this week Jorge Masvidal was there,
Yeah.
and he did the running knee,
Now
and
that to me sounded like that was a huge pop for Masvidal. Was it?
yeah, it's funny because in my actual section, it felt like not a lot of people knew who these guys were for whatever reason, but
Mm-hmm.
the other sides of the arena did pop for him, including myself. I did pop for Jorge. It was like, oh snap, Jorge Masvidal is here, and it's a weird thing, man, because like when it comes to this angle, I have a bit to say about this. So the actual angle, I'm not sure what the social media reaction is to this whole thing, but the actual angle wasn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a massive kick out of seeing this dude Jorge Masvidal do a Shining Wizard on Chris Jericho. Like, I just think that's hilarious. Um, but at the same time, I'm not sure where this goes either. Because here's the thing: historically, um, MMA versus pro wrestling angles don't really work outside of Japan,
Mm-hmm.
especially since the advent of organized fighting leagues.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, and I guess I'll give the YouTube viewers a really brief history lesson. So the thing is, these used to be done a lot in the past because the thing is, mixed martial arts in the past didn't pay that great, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of guys with legitimate backgrounds, whether it be, you know, karate or martial arts or mixed martial arts or boxing, they would dabble in pro wrestling. And the angle they would usually play is the whole I'm a real fighter and I'm tougher than these pro wrestlers. And in the past, you could get away with a top wrestling star beating a guy like that, and the audience's intelligence wouldn't be as insulted because we didn't know what organized fighting even looked like.
Yeah.
You know, because there wasn't a league to compare it to, you could buy that pro wrestling was legitimate and that they could beat a fighter. But once things like and the most successful version of this, to be brief, is in 1995, New Japan had a cross promotional feud with a promotion called the UWFI, and the
Mm-hmm.
UWFI it had a bunch of guys who had legitimate shoot backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
And what UWFI, it was basically worked MMA, like it wasn't real, but they worked it like it was MMA, but it was a work,
Yeah.
right? And
So
those
it
guys,
was like strong style before strong style was invented. Like it was a
not
precursor to
even
strong style.
not even. Are you familiar with Josh Barnett's Bloodsport?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that a little bit. Like it's a lot of just kind of grappling
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And so hard. It is actually some strong stuff because there's a lot of hard striking and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And so in the UWFI, you had these guys who, like again, legit background guys, right? And they would do worked MMA. They would basically fake MMA for their shows, and they feud with New Japan. And New Japan at the time, like a lot of their top guys, had some legitimate backgrounds themselves. And so you had this cross promotional feud, and there was a lot of heat because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, the cat wasn't out of the bag when it came to, you know, kayfabe in Japan at the time, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing to compare to what real fighting looked like. So the people bought it, and they bought, oh my God, the top guys in New Japan, are they really the toughest guys in Japan? Like, let's see. And it was a big
Mm-hmm.
crossover show, and ultimately it did humongous business, and New Japan's guys prevailed over the MMA guys, and it made them look like massive badasses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that worked because we didn't know what MMA looked like. But then within a few years, we had leagues like Pride and K1 and the UFC and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
once you saw what these actual fighters kind of looked like and how fighting was, and how if you get punched in the face one time, you are going to be bleeding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like compare that to like professional wrestling where guys are getting work punched all the time and nobody's bleeding. Like it immediately exposes it, right? And
Yeah.
so from that point onward, like it's an insult to your intelligence to see a pro wrestler beat an MMA fighter in a fake fight. And that's why it didn't work. And that's why in the 2000s, when New Japan tried doing things like that, it didn't work. Um, and so I say all that to say this: it would be preposterous if, for I don't know what they're gonna do, but it would be preposterous if AEW had Chris Jericho, let's say Judas Effect Jorge Masvidal. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I don't know what's gonna happen here. Because it's like, are they going to train the UFC guys to do a wrestling match? And if so, are they going to lose to like the inner circle? Like, what happens there? So I don't know. I hope that something they can work something out where this makes sense to a degree.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't know if it's one of those things where Jericho takes a bat and hits Jorge in like the leg or something, and that's how he beats the UFC fighter. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, to
What's up?
me, to me, it kind
Yeah,
of feels like because you're absolutely right. The way that it is now, if you just take Jorge Masvidal,
yeah,
first like you cannot tell the story anymore that oh these MMA guys, these are the real toughest fighters in the world. You
yeah,
you can't
yeah.
do that. And I think a reason for that is one, because everyone knows that it's kayfabe. So
Yeah,
as soon as you say these are the real toughest guys, what it used
it's
to
a
mean
problem there.
is right. What it used to mean is, oh well, we think these pro wrestlers are tough, but we don't know anything about these guys, so let's find out. Well, now what it means
Yeah,
is, well, pro wrestling's fake. So immediately you're
yeah,
just saying wrestling's fake. So that
yeah.
so
You're saying that, and then if you then do the match with the pro wrestler versus the MMA fighter, and the pro wrestler wins, you're like,
mhm.
well, yeah, it's just phony nonsense.
Right,
So
right, exactly. So
and even yeah, yeah,
so what I'm saying is, from my perspective, what you could do, and
yeah.
what I think is the right thing to do if you're going to involve this, because I don't think that you should shut off any connection between mixed martial arts and pro wrestling, because there are a lot
No,
of
no,
connections between the two. So I think the
absolutely.
the best way to do it is to present, in the world of kayfabe, present
Yeah.
mixed martial arts as one style of fighting and pro
Hmm.
wrestling as another style of fighting. And when these two clash, what exactly does that look like? And what I think
Yeah.
what would become possible then is for fans to suspend their disbelief and
Hmm.
say, okay, so now this is, like, I understand that MMA fighters are, they fight for real, and
Yeah.
wrestlers, they fight in a simulated sense. Um,
Yeah.
but if in the world of kayfabe you're presenting it as just two different styles, I
Yeah.
personally would be able to suspend my disbelief if if the if the mixed martial artists could wrestle to any to any competent degree. And I think the best example of that is Brock Lesnar, because
Yeah.
Brock Lesnar not only looks like the most intimidating pro wrestler that there's ever
Yeah.
been, but he
Exactly.
also is one of the most intimidating mixed martial artists there's ever been. I mean, he was a
Yeah.
heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
So those
Yep.
two things combined mean that dude should never lose a match for any reason.
For
But
any reason. Oh.
because he is such a good wrestler,
Hmm.
you can suspend your disbelief with him
Yeah.
almost, because he almost forces you to suspend your disbelief, right?
He,
You
he,
you
he
can
he
you
does
see
he
him
does
and you're like,
and
this is
he's
real.
yeah, that there's that, and he's usually heavily protected. So when he does
Yeah.
start to sell to somebody, or the rare guy does get the upper hand on Brock Lesnar,
Hmm.
it's one of those things where it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, no one usually can get Lesnar like this. So if this guy can knock him down, then he's a badass.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So
he has found a happy medium with working that out.
right, exactly. So I think in this case, like let's say Jorge Masvidal is looking at it and saying, "Man, I'm out there, I'm in mixed martial arts, and the UFC's not paying me what I want, and it's a hard life, so
Hmm.
let me try this pro wrestling thing." So let's say that Jorge Masvidal is thinking, I want to try pro wrestling. I don't think that Chris Jericho should get a match against Jorge Masvidal. Now, if you put Jake Hager in a match against Jorge Masvidal, and
Yeah, now you can maybe do, yeah, exactly. Like, remember the Wardlow cage match he had?
yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
I said this at the time then, right? Worked MMA, you can pull it off when they're on the mat grappling,
Hmm.
because like you can do that and you can work that, right?
Yeah,
It only looks bad when you do fake punching. Like that looks kind of like stupid.
yeah.
But but I could see a worked cage fight if you really want to go there with Masvidal and Hager, and you mostly keep it to the mat. You mostly keep it to grappling. You
Hmm.
know, you try to do as legit a punch as maybe you can, or an elbow strike, and then you throw. If you do a quick blade job in the middle there, you can do a halfway convincing
Yeah.
MMA fight. Worked. And so maybe they do that. I'll say this, man, about this. Like, I legitimately don't know where this is going,
Yeah.
and it could be a total disaster. It could be somehow pulled off. But
Hmm.
I'll tell you this: I am very curious because either way,
Yeah.
I feel like if it is bad, it'll be like car crash entertaining bad. And the thing is, because there's so many big names involved in the UFC world, you can get you can get a big you can get some publicity out of this.
Oh yeah.
So we'll see what happens. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens with this whole situation.
I agree, and there are people, and I said this last week on the podcast as well. Specifically, Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison to me
Hmm.
seems like the next Ronda Rousey when it comes to pro wrestling. Like she has
Hmm.
everything that Ronda had in
Yeah,
terms of
she was into the segment.
yeah. Oh, she absolutely was. And
Yeah,
she, in terms of her shoot background, she has everything that Ronda had. The only difference is Kayla is succeeding in the PFL, whereas Rousey
yeah,
obviously became a star in the UFC. But they have the same qualifications. Kayla did better in the Olympics than Ronda did. They both have the MMA qualifications, and they both seem to just have that natural character that
yeah.
that personality that comes out in pro wrestling. So for people like Kayla Harrison, if she wants to make the jump over and become a pro
Hmm.
wrestler, she is one of those
She could
that
pull it off. Yeah.
exactly like Ronda Rousey, she can, as long as she can wrestle competently, and I have no reason to believe that
Hmm.
she couldn't. She could
Yeah.
be a legitimate, everyday type of player. To take a sports reference, she could be an
Yeah.
everyday type of player for AEW and become, one of their main draws for someone
Yeah.
like Masvidal, or like maybe if they wanted to go with Dos Santos, or
Or
someone like that,
Orlovsky.
or yeah, Arlovsky. They had one more in there and I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
Um,
I gotta check back.
but if they wanted to go with one of those guys, specifically Masvidal, I don't think it
Hmm.
could be like an everyday kind of thing. I don't know if he'd fit in every week on AEW programming. But if you want to, if you want to bring him out, if he's serious about wanting to get into pro wrestling, and he wants to do a feud every year or whatever, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do something like that. I mean,
Hmm.
he's got a character. He has one thing that stood
Yeah.
out to me is he did the running knee to Jericho. I'm like, there's his finisher. I mean, it's one
Yeah.
of the most
Exactly.
believable finishers you'll ever see because he actually knocked a dude senseless with that, and
Yeah.
only that.
And
So,
the thing about it is like there's so many different styles of pro wrestling
mhm.
that there's certain styles that I think you with the background that you already have in mixed martial arts, you can kind of just carry that over and you learn a few moves here and there and you already are a borderline built-in wrestler, I think.
Yeah,
And not just that, I think when you work in combat sports in America, especially nowadays, I mean, the way you market them, like you have to kind of borderline be a character, and the
hmm,
way they, with the press conferences and everything like that, I have no doubt, like right now, Jorge Masvidal could do a promo segment with Chris Jericho, and it wouldn't be a total train wreck
no,
because
absolutely,
he, when you're in that world, you already know about that stuff where you have to kind of play up with the theatrics and play it up, and
yeah,
just like in pro wrestling, like in the UFC or in boxing, and we've seen with the Jake Paul fights and things like that. Like
hmm,
there's a lot of pageantry that surrounds
right,
what goes on. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Well, there's some guys. I mean, the reason why. I mean, I will admit to this. I want this to work. So I go into this
Hmm.
saying, I like Dan Lambert. I like what they're doing. But part of that
Hmm.
is the fact that I genuinely want this to be good
Hmm.
because I am a big fan of all. I'm a huge sports fan outside
Yeah.
of just
Same.
watching pro wrestling, and I'm a big
Same.
boxing and MMA fan as
Yeah.
well. So there's a lot, just naturally as fans, right? We want to see some of these things cross over, right? It just
Hmm.
it makes us happy to see crossover between the things that we like.
Yeah.
So
It's fun.
one of the things that I would love to see is for mixed martial artists and for boxers even to feel
Hmm.
like I can make the jump over into pro wrestling, and we'll see some good stuff
Yeah.
out of that. And there's lots of people, whether it is Masvidal, Kayla Harrison,
Hmm.
someone I want to see. Amanda Nunez has been on AEW TV, and she's obviously, I mean,
Yeah.
she's not going to jump over because she's the best, female mixed martial artist right now, but maybe at
Yeah.
some point she will. Someone like Conor
Mhm.
McGregor would be an incredible promo if
Yeah,
you put him
yeah,
into a pro wrestling
I would,
situation.
I would really love to see him in like an AEW.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
exactly.
and we've seen successful crossovers. I mean, Ronda Rousey, her 1 year
Hmm.
in WWE was terrific.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, or you go back, like I don't know if you've ever seen Floyd Mayweather fight Big Show at WrestleMania, but that somehow that worked.
Right,
Like,
like
uh,
that's one of those
you
that's
know,
like I have no idea how you could never replicate it, but in that one time in history, it did actually
it
work.
worked. Yeah, it worked. Yeah, Floyd and Big Show worked. Um, and the one thing that maybe wouldn't have worked, and that's probably why they didn't do it, was in '98 Mike Tyson came to the WWF, and
Hmm.
he had the Hell Angle in the middle of the Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels, and it
Right.
seemed like they were teasing Stone Cold versus Mike. And when you go back to like the early, if you go back and watch those the angles setting that up, like what crosses my mind is how do you even book that? Because Stone Cold is like your top dude, and
Yeah.
like obviously Mike Tyson would murder him in a real fight, and so
Right.
I don't know how you do that. And that's why they probably recognize that, which is why they ended up making him the special enforcer for Austin and Shawn Michaels.
Right.
But
Well,
the
and then
point,
that
yeah,
turns out with one of the most famous angles in wrestling history that catapulted Stone Cold into being a
yeah,
super
who he is,
megastar.
yeah,
So they still got their money's worth out of that, even if they couldn't get
exactly,
the match that they
exactly.
thought they wanted.
Exactly, 100%. And so, yeah, and so the point here is, you know, it's not a bad thing necessarily to cross over into other worlds of sports, and
Hmm.
we've seen it done effectively in a way that can benefit a promotion.
Yeah.
And depending on how AEW plays this, you know, there could be massive returns on investment here.
Yeah.
So
I
we'll
think
see how it's from him.
I think what it comes down to is
Yeah,
as long as the people that you involve have the reverence for pro wrestling that
yeah,
they would need to have. So to me
that is a big one. Yeah, yeah,
the
for sure.
best example we've seen is when Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Bucks came on
Yeah.
to he was on Rampage and they showed him
And he was
during
into
that.
it. He was really into it.
Exactly. He was going nuts the whole time. I'm like, that is the
Yeah.
kind of crossover you need. Because that
Yeah.
what you're saying is these people, these huge stars that
I'm really
millions of
happy to
people
be here.
watch on TV, exactly. Like they react to pro wrestling the way that we react to pro wrestling. So that
Exactly.
was, if
And
they're
that's
a
what you
fan,
want.
they do that. If they get involved, then you want, like let's say there's some world where Jorge Masvidal ends up with a wrestling match. You want
Mm.
him to sell like a pro wrestler, right? Because
Yeah,
if
and take it
Masvidal
seriously
starts
and
selling,
care and try. Yeah.
exactly. And if he said, let's say he fights Hager, if he's going in there and he's all arrogant, he's like, I come from mixed martial arts. This is nothing Hager does can
Yeah.
affect me. And then Hager, like the first blow, and Masvidal starts selling like that. That's all you need to get
Yeah.
to get us to buy into someone who's there. You know,
Totally. Totally.
so
For
that
sure.
that to me is what it comes down to. As long as these people want to be here, and that's also something I like about Dan Lambert is it seems like
Mm.
he's not like he in real life would be the opposite of his character, right? He actually
Mm.
does like AEW. He
Of
believes in the
course,
product and he
because
loves pro
if he
wrestling.
didn't he wouldn't be here. And,
Exactly.
but
And he wouldn't
he's
bring
totally
so many people. I mean, he's got like half a dozen
exactly
people from American Top Team that he
for
has
sure.
brought on and
Yeah.
showcased them on AEW TV.
Yeah, he's aware of the criticisms that are levied at the product, and he's fully leaning into like
Hmm.
that type of line of thinking to elicit heat, and to me, I think he's played it really well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I would agree with that. And
mm,
again, just so I can have this to bring it up later when someone says something, you
yeah.
are going on the record and saying Dan Lambert in front of 20,000 people did not have go away heat when he was out.
No, he didn't. And again, like I said, he didn't get to cut a promo, so I couldn't get a full read on it. But when he was in front of 13,000 the week prior, he was actually ridiculously like the heat he got was like just legitimately molten lava, just wrestler heat. Like it was that type of heat
Hmm.
against him. Like him and him and MJF were the biggest heels on the show. It,
Wow.
it, it wasn't like get this off my show.
Hmm.
Again, I think for the live crowd, he really works with the live fans because it's like
Yeah.
when you're so charged up and you're so energetic, you need someone to get the negative anger out on it almost. I compare it to see back in ECW, like their crowds used to be insane, right?
Hmm.
And and you know, they needed like someone to get their vitriol out at. And what Paul Heyman did that was so smart was that One Night Stand 2005, he had Raw and SmackDown wrestlers at the show. And
Right.
so it was yeah, and so it was a perfect thing to just point the middle finger at and say, oh, like fuck WWE. And so
Yeah.
because it's like in a reunion show, you're happy to see everybody from your old promotion, so you're not gonna boo anyone. And so it's like,
Hmm.
who are we gonna shit on? It's like the WWE. And so it's like they're up there on the rafters, like this Raw and SmackDown guys waiting there, and it was
Yep.
perfect. And similarly on AEW, very much it feels like the show is a party, and people are just so happy to watch the show. And it's like this promotion's everything that so many fans wanted out of their wrestling,
Hmm.
and they like everybody, and they like all the wrestling and the wrestlers and everything. And so it's like sometimes it's a little bit hard to really elicit heat. And so it's to me, Lambert in some ways is a disruptor to this party that everybody's having. And
Hmm.
it's like he's the guy coming in from the outside ruining the fun, and he's ruining it by being there and crapping on the thing that people are actively enjoying. And
Yeah.
so in that way I actually think he works, because like I said, you know, like there's many of the heels on the show that people don't legitimately hate. People don't actually hate Miro. People don't
Hmm.
actually really, they play along with Kenny Omega and boo him because they're invested in the story and they've suspended disbelief. But really, people are happy to see everybody on that show, you
Right.
know, because they enjoy AEW so much. Then there's this bastard who comes in and he's saying that this is bullshit, and you're watching a bunch of midgets wrestle and they don't sell, and this is wrestling is garbage, and AEW is abysmal, and man, back in my day in Mid Atlantic, they used to do this and that, and oh my God, and Terry Funk, and blah 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 blah. And so now you have the fans like finally going, no, like screw this guy, he's ruining our party. So he's a disruptor, and I think it's necessary to have a
Hmm.
disruptor as long as you know what you're doing with him.
That's a great way to put it, and I could not
Thank
agree
you,
with you more on that.
thank you.
One thing before we move on, I want to talk about the main event, but one of the questions that we got from our man Peter from Pro Wrestling Musings is
Yeah.
that there were reports that Tony Khan came out. There was an
Yes.
angle. There was an angle that was not televised after the
Yes.
televised angle with American Top Team and everything. So can you take us through that? What
Yeah.
happened?
Okay, so there was actually a handful of Tony Khan angles that didn't take place on TV,
Oh,
and
interesting.
same thing last week. Yeah, like Tony, there's a lot of like mini commercial break Tony Khan angles. It's kind of hilarious. Like it just exists. It exists in the universe of just a live show and doesn't go anywhere else. Because
That's
like
funny.
Tony doesn't, I guess, yeah, he doesn't like being on TV, but he
Hmm.
very much is. It's weird. Like he always says, oh, he doesn't want to be an on-screen character, but for the live fans, he's very much an on-screen character because like he comes out a lot and like wrestlers get involved with him. Like last week, the Acclaimed were they had like a show long storyline with Tony Khan, like and they were challenging him to like a rap battle and stuff and all that, and it
That's
carried over
awesome.
this week, and then it carried over this week, and he brought out rapper Lil Uzi Vert to like confront the Acclaimed.
Uh
As
huh.
for the American Top Team thing, it was very weird. It felt like he jumped on one of the fighters and they like kind of threw him or something. And I honestly can't tell what happened because I couldn't really see it. I thought a fan ran in on the ramp and jumped on a guy. And then like people were like, no, that's Tony Khan, that's Tony Khan, that's Tony Khan. And I was like, what? And then within like seconds, like everyone was just gone. So I don't know what really happened there, but something tells me that because it's Khan and one of the fighters, if that was intentional, then that's definitely something that we will get footage of probably on Dark or something like that. I would
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay. So that
yeah.
was the whole deal with that.
Yep.
Okay. That is really interesting. So I'm what. So
Yeah,
let
it's
me
kind
just
of
ask
weird.
you. I do want to move on to the main event, but since you mentioned it, Tony
Yeah,
Khan has been out there and said he doesn't want to be on TV, anything like that.
yeah.
But
Mm.
he also is someone who obviously has a very keen eye both for business and for wrestling fans. Do you feel
Yeah.
like he's getting big enough reactions from fans that one day he might actually go on TV and do a little bit more than what he's doing now?
The way I see it is this. I understand Tony's desire to not take away from the show or the time of the wrestlers because there's so many people to get involved,
Hmm.
especially now more than ever because there's so much talent,
Right.
and it's like you don't want to take away anything from anybody because
Right.
it's already hard as it is to feature like the roster. Um, but with that said, I've always kind of had the mindset that like I don't fully believe him. Like it's just maybe it's just because I've been watching wrestling for so long, and at some point everybody gets involved, like the people who are
Hmm.
behind the scenes. Freaking in TNA, like Dixie Carter was running the promotion, and like she was
Ugh.
somebody who was just a lady, and like you'd think like she'd never get involved, and even she got involved. Like I just everywhere
Hmm.
people get involved, and maybe that's almost why Tony Khan has such a hardline stance on not doing it, because like it's
Yeah.
such a trope, you know.
Right.
But at the same time, um, I don't know. I feel like there was a point in time where I just didn't believe him and I thought he'd be a character, but that ship might have sailed now because they're so strapped for time as is when it
Yeah.
comes to featuring people. You know,
Yeah.
uh, I, I think for now it's going to be played the way it is, where it's like he for the live fans he comes out a number of times just to give updates on things,
Hmm.
and as for the main show, like he explained it pretty well. He said like I exist. I'm a part of AEW canon. I'm the guy who makes the matches, so I will
Right.
be mentioned and cited. But in terms of being a guy having backstage segments where he's sitting in a big chair and people are like, Tony, I need to talk to you. Like, it like it almost feels unnecessary to have. You can imagine just like
And-
freaking just Kenny Omega walking up to like Tony, make the match, and he's like, no, no, Kenny, not this week. Like, no,
Not this
there's,
week.
there's not much of a need for it, especially when again there's just so much to get to on these shows.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, I agree. I feel like there is room for a babyface matchmaker, and Tony Khan is a babyface, and he probably will be a
Mhm.
babyface forever. Like as
Yeah.
long as people love AEW, Tony Khan is
Yes.
going to be seen as the guy who helped make that happen.
Yeah. It's
So
the same way that like Triple H was a massive babyface to NXT fans
right,
for
right,
a while. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So to me, it is. I agree with you. It's effective. Like you think about, speaking of Kenny Omega, and the Tony Khan thing, like
Yeah.
all the way back when John Moxley stormed into the office in a cold open and was like
I
yelling
remember
and,
that.
and saying, make
Yeah.
this match with Omega,
Yeah.
like that was effective, and we never even saw Tony Khan. Right, I mean, he's been on
Yeah.
TV like twice in his
Yeah.
entire in the entire history of AEW.
Of AEW.
So I think they do a great job of keeping it simple, keeping Khan
Hmm.
off TV, not oversaturating. Because you look back
Yeah.
at Vince McMahon or Eric Bischoff or something like
Hmm.
that, where they were on
Yeah.
TV constantly. I mean, it wasn't
Hmm.
every week; it was like every hour they were on
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah. 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 The McMahons themselves are like the protagonists on the show, essentially.
Yeah,
Eh,
well, they
See,
were some of the biggest characters. The
yeah,
whole McMahon family.
yeah, and the way I look at it is this: like, I'm not somebody who automatically hates authority figures in wrestling,
Hmm.
but if there's no need for it, there's no need.
Yeah,
To me, like Vince was really great at what he was doing, which is being the bastard boss of the show, and it worked for the show at the time.
yep,
But Tony Khan, and I'm sure he himself would acknowledge this, he doesn't have the TV presence that an Eric Bischoff or a Vince McMahon does. And
yep,
that's fine. He's not a TV performer. He's a guy who has a lot of money, that knows a lot about wrestling and runs a wrestling company very well.
yeah.
And that's fine. And so that's what he does. He knows his lane and sticks to it. I'm sure if
Hmm.
he was a more overtly, charismatic person, he'd probably maybe consider it more.
Hmm.
But as is, just being regular Tony Khan, I don't see what he would add to the show, and,
Yeah,
and I'm sure he sees that as well, and that's
yeah.
primarily why he chooses not to be a part of it.
Yep, I would absolutely agree. I think if you're AEW, and I'm not saying they should go down this route, but if they
Hmm.
ever thought, let's try out a more
An
prominent
authority
on-screen authority figure, Cody Rhodes
Hmm.
is the guy. That is the guy
Yo,
that
oh
brings
my God,
everything that Tony
dude,
does not.
dude, I can't remember if I put this on my round table about CM Punk, but in my mind, right, the way I have Cody Rhodes going heel
Mm-hmm.
is a very subtle and slow turn where he's leaning into all the criticisms about himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this vision in my brain, right, of like CM Punk cutting a promo, and he's being very kind of CM Punky, and it's a big love fest. And you have Cody Rhodes walk out there with a headset, right? And he kind of just gestures with his neck, like it's time to wrap it up. And Punk's like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And Cody's like, "Wrap it up. We got shit to do." And Punk's just kind of like, "Huh?" And Cody's basically like, "Go to commercial and shit." Like he's being a total douchebag.
Uh-huh.
And I would have him just like on a weekly basis just do little subtle things to just kind of like show that he's basically swinging his dick around, and like with his power as an EVP.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you slowly bring that to a point where like it's one of those things where in his mind he's justified in what he's doing because it's like, dude, I made AEW. Like
Yeah.
I'm just trying to work for the betterment of the show. But really, like fans are just starting to increasingly crap on him because of like how he's been. And I do agree with you that like if there was ever like it wouldn't even be an authority figure. He'd still be a wrestler, but it's just more that
Mhm.
like what you do is you more so acknowledge that he's an EVP on air because
Yep.
he acknowledges it. It's just not really playing into anything. He
Right.
his role on TV as a wrestler. What you could do now that he's a heel, he could just kind of say like, "We're not doing that match tonight. Why? Because I'm an EVP." And he just happened like what? And it's just like, "Oh, piss off," like just
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, they've
But
sort of they've teased it a little bit, like the Young Bucks saying we're EVPs, extremely violent
yeah,
people, and
yeah,
going
yeah.
that. So they've gotten
Mhm.
to the edge
They lean
of
into it.
that.
Yes, yes, they lean into it for sure.
I
Yep.
would I'm with you on your fantasy booking. That would be something I would love to see. And then
For
Cody
sure.
Rhodes is a great heel, regardless of whether he has
Yes,
that level of heat,
power or
but
not.
just. But
Yeah.
to put him there in like the position that every fan didn't want to see him in, as long as he's
Mm-hmm.
not overused, right? I mean, that's the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff like that can get oversaturated very quickly. But
Mm-hmm.
as long as he's not overused, I feel like that is the makings of like an all-time heel
Great
program.
heel. Yes,
All
totally
right.
agree.
All right. AEW can take that. If you're listening, you can
Yes.
take that straight from
Yes,
Hangman Adam Pierce here.
for
All right.
sure.
So let's get to the main event: Mox and
Mhm.
Kingston versus Suzuki-gun, right? Minoru Suzuki
Yeah.
and Lance Archer. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what the first thing right off the bat that I want to ask you: matches like
Yes.
this, I feel
Mhm.
like these are the kind that come off so different on TV than they do to the live audience.
They
So
do. They
I,
do.
I assume that you've gone back and watched this match on TV as well.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I have.
What are the differences between
I have
watching
completely
this?
different.
What are the
I'm saying this right
differences
now.
between watching it live and watching it on TV?
My perspective on this match is totally different depending on the version I seen.
Okay.
Like, it was a bit similar to last week when Moxley and Kingston fought 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when wrestlers brawl on the outside and you're there live, it's hard to see where they are and what's going on
Mm-hmm.
compared to when it's in the ring. Like there's a spotlight on the ring, you're looking at the ring, you're seated to view the ring, and when they fight outside, it's a bit harder to see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised to kind of like realize this. Like I never thought about it until like I got in the arena. And like when they kind of fight on the outside and stuff like that, it's kind of like, oh man, like get back in the ring, I can't see you. um, and I'll tell you this. So I'm sure different things contributed to this. Like I was very tired by this point of the show. I was very, very tired.
Yeah.
And me and my friends were kind of just like, all right, well, hopefully, we see some insane shit when this match happens. And I actually didn't think this match was very good when I was in the arena.
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought it was just kind of maybe my expectation, because like think about this, the last really violent match we saw on TV with AEW with Archer and Moxley was the Texas Death Match, and
Mm-hmm.
if you remember, that match is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And we've seen other crazy matches on AEW's, and relatively speaking to those, this felt very tame when I was there live.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there was a very long heat segment that didn't feel like it was paid off properly, and that was when I mean it was paid off, but like so when you're there live, right? There's a part where Moxley gets his hands tied together with tape, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of it was during the commercial break, but the entire commercial break is just Moxley on his knees with his hands taped, and they're just kind of kicking him slowly and like poking at him and like poking him with a kendo stick and just tugging at him and just tipping. Like it was weird. Like it was a really weak, long heat segment. I was like,
Yeah.
what the hell is going on here? And then I see Eddie on the corner like peeking at the monitor to know when he can come back in the ring. I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, what the hell is going on? And yeah, it just felt like in the arena in a different way compared. Like remember how I said I like the Young Bucks are great live because it's like it's a spectacle and seeing like this all the acrobatics, right?
Yeah.
I almost wanted to see us like selfishly I wanted to see a violent spectacle here, and instead it was just kind of like this like cartoony like fight with like just like weapons being used in like kind of boring ways
Yeah.
is how I saw it live, right? And I did like seeing Homicide again.
Hmm.
Um, I popped for that. The people in the arena knew who he was,
Yeah. Now that
and
that the Homicide thing felt like
mhm,
people wanted to pop huge for it, but they were so tired that they literally could
mhm.
not muster the energy to pop the way they wanted to. That's how it came off on TV.
It was that, but I think it was just also like maybe some people just might not be super familiar with him.
That yeah,
Um,
that's fair. That's fair.
for me, like, see, I've been following Homicide from his TNA days in Ring of Honor,
Mm-hmm.
and I also am aware of his relationship with Eddie Kingston, and
Mm-hmm.
so I knew what they were doing there because he's really good friends with Eddie Kingston. Like they're really really close, and so that's why he saved him. So that's why I reacted big. But yeah, like here's the thing. Even though I'm saying that live, I didn't think this match was very good. It wasn't like in an upsetting way. Like it wasn't in a way that ruined the show. Because like ultimately, like I was happy with the event, and like I just wanted to see Eddie Kingston and John Moxley win. And when they did, like it was a nice little happy send the fans home happy moment. And Eddie
Mm-hmm.
Kingston, it wasn't shown live, but Eddie Kingston cut a really really phenomenal and heartfelt promo after the show,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope that makes YouTube. I think it will eventually. I hope it makes YouTube because it was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so here's the difference. When I watched it on TV, maybe because I have adjusted expectations now, but I realized that it was a fun match. Like a lot of the slower parts were more during the commercial break,
Right.
and so it kind of cut off the fluff. And then what we did get was fun. It was fine. I like legitimately like my feelings on a match are totally different. I get a better view of the action that I couldn't see prior, like on the outside. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Right.
And yeah, I thought ultimately it was a fun little tag match to close the show. So yeah, I'd give it a thumbs up.
No, that's fair enough. One of the things about this, like AEW, they have pushed the envelope in so many ways. And
Yeah.
one of those ways is by introducing, I mean, like, sometimes deathmatch wrestling
Yes.
to an American mainstream audience. And
Yeah.
they've gone from exploding barbed wire deathmatch
Exactly.
and Nick Gage, right? I mean
Yes.
that they've gone that violent
To
to.
kendo sticks and trash cans and tape.
Yeah,
Like
right, exactly. I mean,
like
they've done everything, and
yeah.
between that and Mox and Kenny, the lights out match in 2019,
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
and so you have that, and you have Britt
The
Baker
the
versus
the Britt
Thunder
Baker. Yeah.
right, and so it feels to me like with this one, they were saying, okay, we need to figure out something else to do. And
Hmm.
what they decided to do was let's just try to make the baby faces as sympathetic as humanly possible. And the way they did that is
Yeah.
by basically spending half the match in an extended heat segment where they just beat the
Yeah.
hell out of mostly Moxley and sometimes
Hmm.
Kingston, right? I
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it felt like I see what they were trying to do. It
Yeah.
didn't come off the way that I wanted it to. Maybe it's because
Hmm.
I, it's possible that this is just me personally. I felt
Hmm.
like, yeah, we've seen a lot of hardcore matches, but this is
Yeah.
Moxley and Suzuki, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't care if you give me a style of hardcore match that we've seen AEW do before. I kind of
Because
just want to
if
see
they do it,
violence.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And the thing about it is, I would I would feel more sympathy for the heat segment if it was a more punishing heat segment, but
Yeah.
it just didn't feel that punishing or sympathy worthy. Like
Uh
it
huh.
just like again, I mean, just historically, like we've seen people like Mick Foley fall into thumbtacks, and within AEW, within their own promotion, we've seen people get absolutely just battered. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
like I said, John Moxley being taped, getting poked at with a kendo stick. Like I've seen Moxley tank crazier stuff, and we've
He's
seen
taking
Moxley.
crazier stuff in AEW.
Yeah, we've seen Moxley. We've seen him like literally get choke slammed onto like the tippy part of the chair. Like remember when they did? Remember when Archer
Oh,
put
yeah,
the
I
two chairs
remember
back
that.
to back and yeah,
Yeah.
and he got back first onto the tip
Oh,
of
that
the
was
like
disgusting.
yeah. Yeah, and so like seeing him kind of get poked at, I'm like in within the universe of AEW, I'm like, this ain't shit to John. Like John Moxley can handle that. That's nothing. I mean,
Yep.
John Moxley's been in absolute wars. John Moxley's had literally explosive barbed wire blow up on his back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
like
No, I completely agree with you, and here's the evidence for that. So if you look at the graph, the flow of offense chart, you can see
yeah.
that from the 3rd minute through almost to the 9th minute, right? So literally half the match was heat.
Yeah.
It was just Suzuki-gun on top of Mox and King the entire time. There was not a point where they were even close during that time. But if you look at if you look at the stats for the whole match, Mox and Kingston, 58% of the match offense and 22 big offense spots, right? That is not something that should happen when half the match is dedicated to a heat segment for the heels. You should not still have the baby faces looking like that offensively. So to me, it goes back to what you were saying, that the heat segment, it just didn't feel as violent as it should. You know, I mean, on the one hand, like I don't want anyone to get hurt, so I don't want to say, oh, that was too tame, because I mean they were still doing, you know, Kingston still went through a table, Moxley still took like a gazillion kendo stick shots, so you know, I don't want to sound like.
I'm not advocating for these guys to literally mutilate themselves.
I don't want to sound like the Monday morning quarterback and say, well, you know, you didn't take a kendo stick to the face, so you know that really is not enough for me. Like I don't want to be that guy, but I think there is something to the idea that, you know, maybe that heat segment just didn't have enough in it. You know, if it was that much but shorter, it would have been better, or if it was a little bit more violent in that length of time that they got, maybe it would have been a little better.
Exactly, and I felt the same way, and that's why, like, when I watched it on when I watched it on TV with my expectations adjusted of how much violence to expect, I was able to appreciate the match a bit better because I knew it wasn't going to be that type of, like, you know, craziness. But like being there live, like I in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm at this event, and it's going to end with some insane shit. Because I've seen other AEW shows on regular television end with insane shit. Like we've seen, like I said, we've seen Jericho and Nick Gage go through glass. You know what I mean? We've seen white tubes. We've seen Britt Baker just with a crimson mask. Like,
yeah, exactly. So, you saw Baker go into the thumbtacks and then through a table.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking we've seen Darby jump off anything and everything. So I'm thinking John Moxley, Eddie Kingston in New York against Lance Archer and Suzuki, lights out. These guys are going to close the show killing each other.
Exactly.
And instead they had like a WWE Extreme Rules match, you know, which is fine. Again, like, you know, on replay with the expectations adjusted, it was a fine, solid main event. But you know, I think those reasons I laid out are the reasons why being there live, that coupled with the fact that I was tired, were why I didn't receive the match as good as maybe I could have. But I wasn't, again, though, I wasn't like angry, though. It wasn't like, man, what the hell? It was just kind of like, the match wasn't as good as it could have been. It was kind of how I felt.
Absolutely. Well, I think I think you said it all right there, that you were tired. And I think this match, had it happened after 2 hours of wrestling, it would have gone much better. Because I think the idea was that this was going to be a storytelling hardcore match. That the whole story was Moxley is getting his ass kicked for half the match. Yeah. Kingston cannot, you know, stop this.
Save
and eventually, and eventually Homicide comes in, saves both of his friends, gets the moment with Eddie Kingston. They do their thing, and the baby faces win. If it had been after 2 hours of wrestling, I feel like it would have worked really, really well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, which as an idea, the way you put it out there, that's a solid, broad idea. You know, just Moxie is getting the crap kicked out of him. Eddie can't make it to save his friend. Eddie's other best friend comes and saves both of them, and they all stand tall in New York City. And that's a solid, broad layout, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were envisioning, and I think what they didn't quite like I don't know who put this match together or who decided. Obviously, you know, Tony Khan must have had something to do with it because Homicide shows up, so it's not like like the wrestlers made that call. They're just like, all right, let's get this guy in here. But so whoever they were putting it together, I think they didn't quite take into account how tired people were going to be at the end of this. And so after 4 hours, you weren't going to get the kind of emotional payoff from the fans because they just were too tired to register all those emotions that you're throwing at them. And so that moment of the huge pop for Homicide and for Kingston finally making the save and for Moxley winning and Kingston breaking the kendo stick over Lance Archer, all that stuff. I think all of the emotion that the fans are supposed to convey, I think they were just too tired to be able to convey that emotion. And I think that was the one misstep that they had in this match, was not taking that into account. Am I close in that in my assumption? Is that being fair?
100%. Absolutely.
Well, I have a feeling. I mean, I know that they will do this again because it just got announced that Mox and King will again take on Suzuki-gun in a hardcore match. I forgot it's like a Philadelphia Street Fight or whatever they're calling it, but it'll be on a New Japan show.
On a New Japan show, I think they might as well blow this off with a crazy. You know what they do, because they're aware as we know, like Moxley versus Suzuki at Dynamite was a good match, but it was limited by the amount of time that they had, and so I guess the only logical thing to end this is you have Moxley and Suzuki have one last match, maybe at a pay-per-view, but the way AEW paces their big matches, they're not afraid of throwing them on television.
Yep.
So who knows when exactly they get to it, but ultimately I guess the big payoff is to finally give us the Moxley Suzuki match on AEW television. Not the 5-minute version, but like an absolute all-out, whatever it is, 16-minute war on TV, or pay-per-view.
Yeah, I now that one, I feel like if you wanted to build it forward, I wouldn't rush that. I feel like if they're saying let's take a couple matches that we want to build Revolution 2022 around, that could be one of them. Because we don't want to rush to that. Oh, you're talking about super
long term. Okay.
Yeah, well, because I'm saying
I thought you were saying Full Gear.
Well, I mean, so you could do it at Full Gear if you really wanted, and I think that would be fine. But I think because people have seen this match now multiple times. They now you don't want to
burn it out maybe too much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what it is. I think this is still something that fans want to see. This is still a dream match, even though we've now seen it multiple times in multiple different promotions. So I feel like it could do with a long build so that anticipation goes up and they start to allude to the fact, Moxley can actually start saying things, like, I know that we did not have the match that we were supposed to have, and saying I didn't kill this old man, right? I mean that's basically what Moxley can come out and say is like, Suzuki's still breathing, so I didn't do my job,
exactly. So the battle's not really over,
right? And I think you could get a few months of build out of that, and continuing to develop Moxley's character. I think you could do that at Full Gear if you really wanted to. Yeah. But I almost feel like it would be better if you really stretched it, either Revolution or to some big TV event, just so that we're not getting oversaturated with that match. We've been using that word a lot.
Yeah. Because they could run the risk of people getting sick of seeing them involved with each other. I mean, hell, I was starting to actually get a bit tired of Eddie Kingston and Moxley fighting with 2.0 a little bit. Like I didn't mind that as a thing to do on TV, but it almost felt like every week they were either getting jumped by them or had to fight them in some type of permutation of a multi-man tag match. And so yeah, I could see, like, you don't want to burn off people on just Suzuki and Archer and Mox and Kingston, because that's a cool matchup, and you don't want people to be apathetic towards something that should be received well.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely right. And the thing about Moxley and Kingston is, I think AEW they don't have plans for these guys in a title picture or even in like a main event level thing, just because there's only so many spots for that. And you have CM Punk, you have Bryan Danielson, you have your champions. So I don't think they have a plan for those guys at this point. And you're not going to take the belts off the Lucha Brothers after having them just won it. So it feels to me like AEW saying, these guys, we know they're going to be over no matter what they do, whatever promo they cut, whatever they do, they're going to be over. And we know that. So they're just kind of throwing them out there against these teams, against 2.0, against Suzuki and Archer. And so I think for now that's working fine. But, you voiced it perfectly, is that at some point that's not going to work anymore. It's at some point you are going to have to give these guys a more meaningful story, and a match against someone or some team that we haven't seen before that we can really sink our teeth into. You
Yeah,
can't
for
just
sure.
you can't just walk on the treadmill forever. You do have to advance it at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And the other observation I made though is and not that these guys are bad together, but I actually think that, and by saying this, I'm not advocating for them to totally split. Like they could still be associated with each other, like on screen. But I kind of like Eddie Kingston and John Moxley more in single settings than together. Like I feel like John, like his last singles match he saw was him against Kojima, which is good. And
Hmm.
Eddie Kingston and Miro had a hell of a match at All Out. And I feel like they almost, I don't want to say sleepwalk, but they almost adhere to the easy built-in formula when they tag together of just kind of fighting on the outside the minute the match starts, and they get
Hmm.
in and chop each other. Eddie Kingston does the hot tag with the exploder and the enziguri, and Mox does the paradigm shift.
Yep.
It almost feels like it almost feels like they're clocking in for work, and it's like a 9 to 5 for them, like just the built-in Eddie Mox match.
Yeah.
And their formula is not a bad formula, but I feel like they, I don't know if it's that they're not challenging themselves, but I feel like they get more out of themselves individually when they fight, when they wrestle in single settings. Is
Hmm.
kind of how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you on that.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I thought I was gonna be like a hot take or something. Like, oh.
No, no. Oh, I agree with you. It's nothing against Mox and Kingston.
Yeah,
I mean, no one's
yeah.
questioning their love for pro wrestling or anything like
Of
that.
course, of course, of
It's
course.
just it works, and they've probably been told or they've read the writing on the wall that we don't have anything for you in terms of like a main
Yes.
event level storyline. So this is
Yeah.
what you're doing, and they're saying, okay, fine. I mean, it's not like they're taking it
Yeah.
easy. That style is still hard on your body, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
still
For sure. But
so it still takes work. But they're just saying, why would we kill ourselves against
yeah.
2.0 if it's not going to
No.
be like that level of feud that both of these
Hmm.
guys have had in the past with each other and
Hmm.
with other people.
Exactly. And when they have those matches, it almost feels like a day in the office for them. Like I said, it's like
Hmm.
they 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 don't even have to think too much about it. It's just they go out there and they are just John Moxley and Eddie Kingston. They go
Yep.
out there, they fight a little bit, they get heat on each other.
Hmm.
Kingston hot tag, and then Mox does the finish, and that's just kind of how it goes. And
Yep.
so,
One.
yeah,
What I was 100% agreed. 100% agreed with you
hmm
on that.
yeah, yeah.
So you spent 4 plus hours watching wrestling.
4 plus hours.
Yeah.
Yes.
Watching wrestling
Yes.
at Arthur Ashe. So I do not want to make you spend 4 plus hours talking about the 4 plus hours that you spent watching wrestling at Arthur Ashe. So I'll let you get out of here, but I want to ask you one thing to sort of encapsulate your whole experience at
Yeah.
Grand Slam. Immediately
Yeah.
after the event, reports were out that AEW wants to do Arthur Ashe again, and Arthur Ashe
Yeah.
wants them back to do it again.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing I thought about when I saw this was saying, okay, the first time around, the novelty of it was to
Yeah.
me the big spectacle. It was the first ever
100%.
wrestling event at Arthur Ashe. It was the most fans that AEW has ever had.
What's the show gonna
20,000
look
people.
like? What's it gonna come off
Exactly.
like?
Exactly. And you're in New York.
Yeah.
Like it was the novelty of everything that really helped.
100%.
That really helped put it over. Now, to me, if you revisit it next, if you revisit this next year, we could be dealing with a totally different set of circumstances, right? That novelty is
Okay.
gone now because you've done it once. It's very possible that AEW may have put on a show in front of more fans than that by the time by this time next year, right? It's possible
Yeah.
that AEW does a show in front of 25,000. So
Potentially. Who knows?
so
yeah, for
you're
sure.
dealing with an entirely different set of circumstances if you were to do this same thing next year. So my question to you is, as someone who was there, is Arthur Ashe a good place to watch pro wrestling? Is it worth going back to, even if the novelty of performing at Arthur Ashe is gone?
I'll tell you this, as a venue, absolutely. As a venue, it's crazy. Like, I always heard about how, like, they've never done wrestling here.
Mhm.
And part of me wondered, like, maybe is there a reason for that? Maybe, who knows? But when I got there, I was like, I remember like the first thing I thought when I got in the venue and I saw the ring and the setup, I looked around and I'm like, how has nobody done wrestling here? Like, what the? This place is beautiful. Like that was my thought. I'm looking around, I'm looking at the ring setup. I'm like, yeah, I can see the ring. It's totally fine. The music's blaring, the set looks good. I'm like, this is a perfect venue for professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So it blew my mind that it was the first time. And I'll tell you this, like, yeah, they should make this a regular tradition in Arthur Ashe. All my grievances regarding the actual venue have nothing to do with the show itself or the venue. It's more so about um how much of a pain in the ass it was to get there and get home. Um, like that night, the show ended at around like 12:15, give or
Mm-hmm.
take, and I was home at like 3:30
Oh my
in
God.
the morning. Yeah, 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 and
Oh,
yeah, and part of it is because the
jeez.
show ended so late that public transportation was very limited.
Okay.
Going back home. Yeah, and so that's kind of what messed it up. Um,
Gotcha.
and so if there's anything I would request of Tony Khan if he ever did this again is, can you please start the show slightly earlier and end it slightly earlier because it is very hard to get all the trains you need at 1 in the morning. So yeah, there was a massive exodus of people just cramming trains and like there's limited transportation going back. So that's a pain in the ass. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I said, if they run this back, you live and you learn. What you can learn from this experience is just adjustments you can make on a logistical level.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it comes to just like I said, you know, you like look if he wants to do it again where it's a Dynamite and a Rampage, just strike a deal with Turner and the TV execs to maybe buy earlier TV time and broadcast it earlier if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Um, just purely for the conveniency of the fans. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but aside from that, though, really, like this is absolutely a place that they should be returning to on a regular basis.
Okay. Well, that's great to hear because I love it when wrestling
Yeah,
is at these non-traditional venues, and I would love for
yeah, yeah.
AEW to be the place where stuff like that
Hmm.
happens. People have been criticizing
Yep.
WWE forever
Hmm.
for having the
Hmm.
same looking stuff all the time, right? Their
Yeah,
pay-per-views
yeah.
and their
It's a
shows, they
big pet
all
peeve of
look
mine.
the same.
It's a big pet peeve of mine. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of people definitely share that, and I would love for AEW to just completely turn that
Hmm.
on its head. Like different places they go, that like Daly's place looks different than
Yes.
when they perform out in Texas somewhere, and then they perform in Arthur
Yeah.
Ashe, and that looks different. And then they do. I would love for them to do the
Yeah.
Jericho Cruise again because that was a completely
Yes.
different thing. So I
I
would
was just
love
gonna
for
say,
AEW to lean into that.
January 2020 was really fun for AEW because
Hmm.
it felt like every Dynamite looked different. Like
Yep.
there was the Homecoming Dynamite in Daily Space didn't look like the Jericho Cruise Dynamite, which didn't look like the regular Miami Bash to the Beach Dynamite they did. Like
Yep.
every
Yep.
Dynamite had a different aesthetic to it, and I'm a gigantic proponent and massive mark for different aesthetics in wrestling.
Hmm.
I love when shows don't look the same, and I love when the sets are differentiated from each other. I don't want my TV show to look like the pay per view, and I don't want the
Yeah.
shows themselves to look the same from each other. Like in a perfect world, and obviously they can't do this because they tape it on the same night. In a perfect world, I'd have Rampage have a totally different set than Dynamite. I'd have it have different rope colors than Dynamite.
Yeah.
I would like I want the shows to be differentiated. I want a different
Hmm.
vibe when I watch one show from the other one. And so I'm always a big proponent for that. And that's why I love when AEW they don't adhere to one type of arena to run. They'll go to a basketball arena one day, and
Yeah.
then the next day they'll go to like a smaller, more intimate setting, and then another
Hmm.
day they'll go to a stadium. Like cause, and that variety visually
Hmm.
is just something I do appreciate.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. I want to I want to just put this out into the universe because this is something that I am a huge mark for. I think it's because I
Yeah,
grew up playing baseball and then my brother was
yeah,
really into baseball. And
yeah.
if you've ever been around youth baseball,
Hmm.
when you go to tournaments,
Hmm.
there's a massive venue that you're at with all these different fields. There's games going
Yeah.
on, there's concessions, there's stuff, there's people to talk to, right? There's all this stuff happening. And it's a really cool environment. So what I've always wanted is to see different sports, different events, try something like that because I think there's just a different vibe that you get from doing that. So, in with that in mind, I'm going to put this out into the universe and hope that one day it comes to fruition. everyone talks about WrestleMania weekend as being this huge thing, right? This huge event, and there's all kinds of stuff going on around WrestleMania. And unfortunately we haven't had it the last 2 years, but hopefully that's coming back next year. So one thing that I would love to see is for AEW to do its own version of that, but to actually do it at Arthur Ashe and convert each court into a wrestling ring and bring other shows, and they get those courts to use.
That's a really, really cool idea.
I would love to see that happen. So what you could see is like AEW gets Arthur Ashe, they get 20,000. But then next to Arthur Ashe is Louis Armstrong, which I think seats 10,000, maybe 15, depending on how the. I don't know how
depends on the arrangement.
Right, I don't know how the wrestling stage would affect that, but let's say between 10 and 15. So maybe there you could put like. No other promotion.
You do a New Japan show.
Oh, true, New Japan. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
You could do a New Japan show featuring some AEW guys.
Yeah, exactly. So you could do a New Japan show
on the night before.
Exactly. Do that one in Louis Armstrong, and then during the days you could have some of these, like you could have Impact run some stuff on like Court 17, which I think has 5,000 to 10,000. And then those other the show courts, you could have like PWG running something, you could have IWF running something, you could have maybe even like Rev Pro come down and have them run some stuff.
Well, hell, you could just run a general big indie super show with the biggest names on the independent scene.
Oh, true, exactly. You could do something like that as well. Like that's what I want to say. I want to see AEW.
I never even thought of that. That is a great idea because there are other courts in Arthur Ashe that are smaller. And if you did and the thing is, like AEW is very much a spread the wealth promotion in the sense that they don't try to squash the promotions that are smaller than them.
Yep.
In fact, the rising tide of AEW has helped raise the ships of the promotions around them.
Exactly.
And they're very much a federation where if they get somebody from the indies, they're not prohibiting them from still fulfilling their dates and things like that.
Yep.
And we've seen it with guys like Wheeler Yuta and Daniel Garcia, and we're going to see it now with Lee Moriarty, who has recently signed with AEW.
Which is a great signing, by the way. Love seeing him, and
100%.
not only because he interacted with Pro Wrestling Musings on Twitter talking about Omega. And
oh yeah, that was great.
That's not the reason. But thank you.
Shout out to Tiger Style Lee Moriarty. Thank you for the shout out, brother. Yeah.
But look, you are absolutely right that AEW has taken a completely different view of how they interact with the promotions around them. And what I would love is for them to put all of that into one triumphant show or one triumphant weekend where they show we there's all this talk about the Forbidden Door, right, and all this stuff. Well, here's what it looks like when we break that shit down. And this is what you get is tens of thousands of fans.
Yeah, and in that, it would not only would it be a massive statement if they could successfully pull that off, it would literally be a gigantic celebration of professional wrestling as a whole. Yep. And and it would literally be the culmination of collaboration versus monopolization. And in doing that, a massive statement could be made. You can make the argument like, oh man, but some of those smaller shows won't be able to sell out the same amount of tickets. You can always work around it by creating deals or something, like if you buy an Arthur Ashe ticket, maybe you can get off on this, or you can throw, or if you really want, because I'm sure a lot of these AEW guys would be down to do it. I'm sure on those separate days you can throw an AEW wrestler or two on each of those cards to be the attraction to sell the ticket.
Yeah,
I'm sure Danielson would love to fight a Jonathan Gresham at a Ring of Honor show or a GCW show. I'm sure. Yeah. We've seen John Moxley do independent shows. We've seen guys like that do these other side shows.
Yeah,
and so it could be the ultimate triumphant collaboration event.
Exactly.
And I never thought of this. That is a phenomenal idea, Griff. And I'm going to speak it out into the universe, and I'm going to tag Tony Khan every day and tell him he should do this.
All right. So here's how you do it. Talking about the ticket sales, because we're in Arthur Ashe. So I don't know if you're familiar with how the U.S. Open does their tickets, but when you buy a ticket for the U.S. Open, essentially what you're doing is you are buying. If you buy a ticket to Arthur Ashe, then what it also comes with is basically like a pass around the entire facility, and you can just walk in to any court.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can watch
Wow.
whatever matches are going on there. So that's exactly what I think you would do, is if you buy a ticket for
Perfect.
AEW
Perfect.
for the show, for the big show in Arthur Ashe, what you also get
Yeah.
is your pass for the whole weekend or whatever you're doing to go to any
Exactly.
court, any ring, and watch whatever's going on at the time. And what you can do is you structure it so that all of the things that are around Arthur Ashe that I'm sure you saw, right? All of the luxury, or rather the non-wrestling, the non-event related stuff that you can do to just hang out and chill. That's, you know, you just do that. And then when you feel like going to watch a match, you go do that.
Exactly. And the big secondary show to AEW could be the New Japan show, where I think for that one, because New Japan right now, they're running shows in the States, like for their tapings for New Japan Strong.
Yep.
And there's a lot of talented guys on the cards, but they are struggling to sell some tickets right now. And I think what could help them is if they got some of the bigger stars from Japan, like an Okada, like a Tanahashi, like a Naito, like a Shingo, and you put them on this show. And you can maybe do some of those rematches that you haven't been able to get to. Maybe you do Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega. Maybe you finally get to do, you know, like something like that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And Okada versus Bryan Danielson in Arthur Ashe on the Louis Armstrong. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of different options to play with here. And that's the best pitch I've heard all month. Like, holy crap.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a great pitch.
Immortal Vegan is back in the chat, which, by the way, of course I remember the name. I appreciate you being here. And they say that yeah, exactly. And they love to see Tokyo Joshi Pro, DDT, Stardom, you know, get involved in something like that as well. To me, that would be something that they could really get in on as well. Like those promotions that haven't really moved to the States yet. That would be something that they could do, is saying, look, there's like 20 courts at Flushing Meadows. So saying,
exactly.
You want, we'll set up a ring. You want you want 1,000 people, 2,000 people to come watch, and sort of get that success, sort of be the beneficiary of the success of AEW. Then come here and perform, come take a trip. New York is one of the best tourist destinations for someone who's never been to the United States. So
100%.
Yeah, come to New York, tour around, do your thing, come wrestle, get in front of more fans. And I feel like you said it perfectly earlier, that a rising tide lifts all boats. And that to me is the ultimate, it would be the ultimate rising tide moment, that AEW could physically lift the tide up, and all of these people would want to jump on their back and be a part of it.
Yeah, it'd be a celebration for pro wrestling.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. What the WrestleMania weekend used to be, now AEW can fully embrace that, and like you said, just celebrate pro wrestling.
Totally, man. Totally.
All right, I'm glad we said that, because that's out in the universe somewhere. So someone somewhere can bring this to the attention and let them know that this is, and Pro Wrestling Musings would be happy to be the title sponsor
to take credit
on this whole event. We don't want anything else other than a sponsorship at this event. That's all we want. Oh,
a check would be nice too, Mr. Khan.
we can talk money once we've actually worked out the details.
Right. Once you worked out the specifics,
exactly. Oh man, I appreciate you coming on this and talking about your experience. This has been awesome. And
it's been great, dude.
I hope you can be on future podcasts. I hope you can make the time and come on future podcasts.
I would love to be on future podcasts.
All right. Well, we will absolutely make that happen. But since this is your first time, I would love to. Well, since this is your first time, what we got to do is you are now going to be introduced to our tradition. We've done it from the very first podcast up until hopefully forever.
Am I gonna get slimed? Is this Nickelodeon? What's happening?
I wish I could make that. If I had the connects to make that happen, you think I'd be here? No,
what are we doing?
All right, so what you have to do is you have to tell the people where they can find you. And since this is your first one, I will let you have as much time as you need to make your pitch of where the people can find you.
Oh man, thank you. Awesome. So listen, if you got into this point in the video, I appreciate you. You're probably a madman, but I appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening to us on the podcast. Again, I thank Griff for featuring me on here. And you can find me at Twitter at Backup Hangman. That is at Backup Hangman. My current Twitter header name is Hollywood Hangman Adam Pierce.
What a name.
So follow me on Twitter for all my bad opinions on professional wrestling. And yeah, that's about it. Make sure to check out the PW Musing site. It's a great site full of wonderful writers. We talk about stuff on a regular basis. We do a lot of statistical breakdowns. Craig does a great job with that. We do the roundtable discussions where we discuss and break down things like AEW Dynamite and Rampage and the pay-per-views when it comes. And there's just a lot of generally good stuff on the site. So make sure to check out the PW Musing site and follow me again at Backup Hangman. Thank you so much.
Hey, he's a great follow. I can vouch for that. That's
awesome.
I don't check Twitter that much, but when I do, when I get to see a tweet from Backup Hangman, that's one of my favorite parts. It really is. I'm not that is not a gimmick. I'm serious. You can check me out on my personal YouTube channel, General Admission Wrestling. While you're there, if you're not already, subscribe to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. Or rather, subscribe to the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel, where you will find the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, as well as all kinds of cool stuff, including a video that is going to go out in just a couple hours, talking about the Kenny Omega Bryan Danielson match, what made it so good, and how it could maybe even be better when they do it again. By the way, Red PG, ask for a shout out. Absolutely, you can have a shout out, Red PG. If that's your name on Twitter, go follow him. If it's not, I don't know. Don't follow a Red.
Comment the Twitter handle on the comments or something.
Exactly. I appreciate everyone for being here. If you did make it to the end, thank you very much. We will see you